Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Wisdom Podcast. I am your host, Janet Sandberg. I am a transformational life coach, channel, and energy healer, as well as a suicide prevention advocate, I guess is the best way to call myself. And today I am here with Diane Kaufman. Diane, welcome, and thank you so much for
Thank you
being
so
here.
much. So glad to be with you.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am, it's hard to know what am I, right? And sort of where am I in my life story? Right now in my life story, I am a retired child psychiatrist after much longer than 40 years of clinical work.
Amazing.
I am the founder director of the Hold On campaign for suicide prevention that uses the power of art to educate, connect, express, and heal. Professionally speaking, I started off being internship and residency and board certified in pediatrics, but I immediately turned around and went into psychiatry and then child psychiatry. I was at the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, which is a statewide, a healthcare system.
Mhm.
Now it's called, and it's merged with Rutgers. It's Rutgers Biomedical and Health Sciences. I was an outpatient psychiatrist. I was the medical director of a preschool service, infant mental health, preschool, therapeutic nursery, kindergarten. I was also medical director of a crisis intervention outreach program. And while I was at UMDNJ, I also started Poetry and Medicine Day. I
Oh, I love
collaborated
that.
with the nursing department and started a program called Creative Arts Healthcare, whereby we'd have artists come, poets, visual
Mm,
artists, dancers related to health and healing, right? And,
amazing.
and then I came out here to Portland, Oregon 11 years ago when my daughter had her first baby. I'm very
Oh,
glad to be here. I
yeah.
continued to be a child psychiatrist, but then I did retire June 30th, 2023, when it was my 70th year. And I
Mm,
decided that
perfect
it
timing.
was time. It was time, right, to
Hmm.
devote myself to other passions. Uh,
Yeah.
and regarding mental health, when I was a medical student, I had attempted suicide. It was serious. My intent was to be dead. Took an overdose of prescribed medication
Mm,
alone in my dorm room. And my fantasy was that I just was not going to wake up, that I was going to
right.
fall asleep and not wake
Mhm.
up. But fortunately, what happened is that I did not fall asleep and I really became violently ill
Oh,
in terms of nauseous, vomiting, which were side effects of the medicine that I
sure.
took. And at that point, I realized that I was not going to be dead. I was alive and that I
Mm-hmm.
was really sick and
Mm-hmm.
I needed help. It's interesting. I didn't need help in wanting to kill myself, but now I was alive. I needed help.
Right.
And, and I reached out to my sister who lived nearby, and I didn't drive at that time. So I must have taken a taxi and got to my sister's home. I don't recall if I told her what I had done. However,
Mm-hmm.
when I was with her and I started to vomit blood,
Ooh.
I must have told her. And I went to Mount Sinai Hospital and was there. And then I was on a medical unit. And I remember I was there a couple of days and I had stabilized medically and I was no longer in any way suicidal. In fact, it was one of those things, Janet, of I want to forget this happened. It was like
Mhm.
going into denial to
Right.
some extent, maybe a little bit of a healthy denial. but also not 100% healthy, because it was like, I want to forget that this ever happened,
Mm-hmm.
and just go back to medical school and
Right.
forget that this had ever happened. But I remember the attending asked me if I wanted to be admitted to the psychiatric unit. Now, I was no longer acutely suicidal, so I could not have been involuntarily admitted.
Right.
Um, I and I just shared with you that I just wanted to forget that the whole thing happened. So for that reason, I didn't want to be in a psych unit. But I also
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to be in a psych unit because I had the hope to become a psychiatrist. And I was thinking, how on earth could I be a psychiatrist if I ended up in a psych unit, which shows the level of shame and stigma
Mm-hmm.
even around medical professionals. But I want to
Yeah.
say that I believe, being a psychiatrist myself, that when he asked me that question, if I had said yes, I wanted to be admitted to the psych unit, I believe he would have admitted me, because why would you ask somebody that question if the answer was going to be, oh, you want to be admitted? Well, I can't admit you to the
Mm-hmm.
unit.
Oh, for
It
sure.
would have been a voluntary admission.
Yeah.
And then I ended up seeing a psychiatrist afterwards, and I was on medication on and off in my life. I've been on medication or in therapy. And years later, I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder, which is
Mm.
episodes of hypomania and depression.
Mm-hmm.
And, I like to write. It's always been an outlet for me. And during medical school, I was writing poetry of just how I was feeling. And there's a clear path of my poetry towards
Oh,
my suicide
interesting.
attempt. And I still have that in my own handwriting, the diary of my poetry. And one of the poems is about being in the lecture hall at the medical school. And it starts off like, on my birthday, they were giving a lecture on depression. And I thought
Mm-hmm.
about what it would like to be or to be not. And in the corner of the page, it says, suicidal ideations from life's frustrations. And then there's another poem about, I am shipwrecked, floating away, oh no, I am flotsam, floating
Mm-hmm.
away from shipwreck, right? And so
Yeah.
there's a whole series of poems. And there's one poem that's more exuberant. It could have been, maybe it was just a better day for me, but I wonder a little bit, who knows, maybe it was a little bit of a hypomanic spurt, because it's talking about the mad leaves falling from the sky and
Hmm.
my asking them to teach me how to fly.
Oh.
Okay. And then there's a poem or two more. And then there's a very desolate poem where it's talking about um, that no one has loved me, no one will ever love me. And the word love must have been in that poem like 20 times. And
Oh,
then it
wow.
talks about, like, I'll have to kill myself so I can hide once more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think shortly thereafter must have been the suicide attempt. So, on the
Mm-hmm.
one hand, poetry can be an outlet,
Yeah.
and I wasn't hurting myself when I was writing the poems, which is good,
Mm-hmm.
right? It
Mm-hmm.
was a way to get my feelings out, but I didn't take it to the next step to either share with someone the poems, like, look what I've been writing,
Right.
or to actually say, I'm in a bad way and I need
Mm-hmm.
help, you know?
Right.
And then in my personal life, when I had been married, my father-in-law died by gunshot suicide.
Oh,
Um,
goodness.
he had a problem with alcohol and also had a chronic lung disorder, and was on an oxygen tank. So
Mm.
there were various things going on in his life.
Right.
And an adult patient of mine with chronic pain died by suicide. When I came to Oregon shortly after I was here, tragically, a teenage patient of mine died by suicide, which was actually the day after I had seen her. I had seen her
Oh.
on a Friday and learned on that. It happened over the weekend. It happened on Saturday, but learned on Monday about her death. And in that last session, um, she talked about being bullied, right? She
Mhm.
denied suicidal ideation. We talked about the stresses that she was under. And I shared with her the quote by Nietzsche about that which does not kill me makes me stronger. And the singer Kelly Clarkson had done a lyric and a song of using that
Mhm.
phrase.
Mhm.
And my patient was singing that during the session with me. So there was a lot of poetry and art and music and, I,
Mhm.
I'm being bullied, but I'm not going to kill myself, and singing the song. And when she left the session and she was walking to school, so she left the session and the mom was still in the session. I think I met maybe the mom and she together, then the girl alone, then the mother alone when the girl had left. She had called the mom to let her know that she was safely at school. And the mom and I were still together. And the mom and I said to each other how well she was doing.
Oh.
We smiled and said how well she was doing. And the next day she hanged herself.
Oh my gosh.
So this was absolutely horrific. Um, and about a year and a half later, so that was in 2014. In 2016, it was Memorial Day, and I was off of work that day apparently. And I'm very involved with arts and healing,
Mhm.
especially poetry and music and song and story. But I was taking a course, or I had paid for a whole bunch of videos on arts and healing. And apparently they had been online for quite a while, but I hadn't been watching them. And all these videos were being taken offline as of, I think, after that day. So I was spending the entire day watching all these arts and healing teaching videos.
Mhm.
And one of them, what the writing prompt was to write a poetic progress note. And even though it was
Oh.
literally a year and a half later, the first thing I thought of was my patient. And I
Mhm.
wrote a poem about the last day that I saw her. And then, of course, what had happened. And that became dramatized. There was a video made of it, of an actress
Wow.
performing the girl, an actress performing the therapist. And it ends with, you don't have to kill yourself to stop the pain. And it has the
Mhm.
988 number. And then I
Mhm.
continued to do all sorts of things around um, artwork, music, songs. The next thing that happened, though, in terms of suicide was a friend of mine who was I think she was about 48 years old. She and I had worked together at the first organization that I worked at when I came to Portland. But then I had moved on from there. So I was
Mhm.
no longer working there. But I'm looking on Facebook, Janet, and I see that my friend and colleague, who was a psychiatric nurse practitioner, someone
Mhm.
that I liked, respected, valued, her expertise, even thought to myself, if somebody needed help, I would refer them to her. If it was a family member, I'd refer them to her. Well, she died and she was young. And I reached out to a mutual friend who also, I think she might have still been working there. She had developed a serious mental illness. Not that
Mm.
all mental illness is not serious, but this was something
Yeah.
severe. I should say
Yeah.
severe. And she was in and out of the hospital, could no longer work. She was the mother of two sets of young twins.
Oh.
A family member came to live with her to help her and take care of the kids.
Mhm.
And she got hold of the car keys and drove her car to the bridge and jumped off.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And this was in August 2019. It was just absolutely shocking,
Mhm.
right? Devastating, tragic, shocking, beyond belief.
Mm-hmm.
And I really felt, and I don't think I had really felt this before, that her psychiatric illness was like a cancer that had devoured her,
Yeah.
because there was nothing of her that would have done what she did.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And what happened after that was it was about 2 weeks after she died, and I was walking down a block parallel to where I live. That block happens to be called Lovejoy. So I'm walking down Lovejoy Street, heading towards Starbucks. The street is tree lined, and I've walked down that block a zillion times. But this time, I there was a tree that caught my attention because of the way the branches were placed on on part of the trunk. Looked unusual to me. And either kneeling next to the tree or when I got to Starbucks, I wrote down a whole bunch of words thinking about my friend. And I took a photo of the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And the words were, just like this tree, we all yearn to grow. Hope lives, shame kills. Every day is Suicide Prevention Day. And then
Mm-hmm.
it goes, take good care of yourself and may you grow ever stronger in your love. And what I did was I sent my words and the photo to an artist collaborator, Amanda Meador, and I asked her to create a poster out of it. And
Oh.
she created a very beautiful poster with an image of a tree and birds flying on top. And on the top left corner is just like this tree. And underneath the tree, it says every day is Suicide Prevention Day and take good care of yourself. But when Mandy sent me the initial image, the roots of the tree were just dangling. There was no earth around the tree, which I thought
Mm-hmm.
was interesting. And I said, Mandy, you have to ground the tree, right?
Yes.
Just like the tree needs to be grounded into the earth, people need to be grounded. And that started, and this was before the Hold On campaign, because that started June or July of 2023. So this is
Okay.
2019, that this started a whole series of what I called creative lifelines. Creative lifelines reach out with compassion and creativity to help save lives. There's one on bullying. There's one on a woman who's in her lap. She has a cat, and it's talking about that the love of her cat kept her alive, which was actually
Mm-hmm.
an essay that a woman had written looking at the first poster, right? Talking about her
Oh.
own mental health history. And of all the things that had happened in her life, she felt it was her cat that helped her to stay alive. Then there's one on help for the helpers, silence, shame, and
Mm-hmm.
stigma, the military, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I've taken my personal experience of mental health, and then the creative aspect, as well as my professional work as a psychiatrist, and most happily have combined them into the Hold On campaign.
Beautiful. Beautiful. There's just, yeah, there's so much to unpack in everything that you've just said. And it's it's always interesting whenever I do these interviews and I hear the stories of whether they're personal stories or stories of people that you have known who've died by suicide. It's always the same. It's just people looking to end the pain and not seeing any other way out. But I'd like to ask you more about your own attempt. You said you were in med school and then you were later diagnosed with bipolar. But what do you think led to that? Like, was it med school itself, which, I haven't been, but I've heard it can be very demanding. Like, what do you think were the pieces that kind of all piled up together there?
Uh, I don't see it as the stress of medical school in terms of the amount of learning that
Mm-hmm.
we had to do. Um, I think that there was a biological underpinning to me that I wasn't aware of, because I can look back earlier and there were other instances of depression, right? When I was in college, even when I was younger than that. I was in a relationship that was not a healthy relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that I was engaging in some impulsive behaviors, which I think that were related to hypomania, that were not, I'm not going to go into detail about my behaviors.
Sure.
However, that I was ashamed of some things that I was doing. And
Okay.
I think it was that shame that tipped me over the edge
Yeah.
into being not able to forgive myself for some things that I had done. And what also was almost in that straitjacket, that one can
Mhm.
get in mentally or emotionally, is that I could not, or I felt that I could not reach out for help.
Mm,
Right. So I wasn't in a family where if you shared a problem, that it would necessarily be compassionately understood.
right.
It was more so you did something wrong, we're not talking to you anymore,
Mm.
or we're disinheriting you, which I had also witnessed with my older sister
Oh
for a
my
number of
gosh.
years. So
Yeah.
I could not turn to my family,
Right. So you're really
and
walking on eggshells
yeah,
and
so I didn't
trying not
have
to
that
make anybody
family.
mad.
I
Yeah.
didn't have family support
Yeah.
um, to be able to turn to them, because I thought that that would be even worse. It
Right.
wasn't even something that would cross my mind to
Mm-hmm.
talk to them about. And I would say, I was going through something kind of catastrophic, right? But
Yeah.
even if it were a more minor thing that I was having a problem, that I thought they might disagree with what I was doing, I did not feel safe to turn to my parents to talk
Mm-hmm.
about this, because
Yeah.
I knew that I would be judged and shamed and ridiculed, and it would
Mm-hmm.
not be helpful. So one thing in suicide prevention, it's so important to have that young person, as they're growing up, have experiences of being able to reach out for help
Yes.
with someone who's going to be able to listen to them.
Yes.
And I
Absolutely.
had not developed a a rich friendship, so I didn't have friends for me to turn to. Also, because of this element of shame, I think that was holding me back too. That I wasn't
Of
necessarily going
course.
to be talking to somebody about what was going on with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then with medical school, even though you'd think it's all about health, right? And you'd want your
Mm-hmm.
medical student to be well, right? At least back then, and it probably to some extent exists now, you would think, well, I'm putting myself in jeopardy if I tell someone I'm having a problem. That should not be the
Mm-hmm.
way it is. And I know there
Right.
are many, many changes now in terms of being more open to please tell us what's going on. We want
Yes.
you, healthcare student, to reach out so you can get the help that you need. But back when I was in medical school and there were medical licensures and all that, that if you were in mental health treatment, that was put as a negative
Right.
about you,
Yeah.
right? So it wasn't that I was going to be sharing this with any of my, medical school mentors.
Mm-hmm.
So I was all alone in a very bad way.
Yeah.
And I'm just fortunate that I lived,
Yeah. Well, and yeah,
and
fortunate that you
fortunate
had
and
your
glad
sister.
that I lived.
Yes. Yeah. And I love the work you're doing. Um, Tell us a little bit more about the Hold On campaign and what that is.
So the way that came about, or even the title of it, because I was not, um, like imagining that I was going to do that. It wasn't in my mind. I was doing, I was still working as a child psychiatrist. I was doing the creative, lifelines, these posters. But then what also started happening was I was writing, I think, more poetry. And it was right around the time of COVID. And I wrote a poem for my patients, and it was called Don't Give Up. And it goes, don't give up even though you want to. And I ended up reaching out on Upwork for a singer-songwriter, and it became a song. And then it became an animation. And then at the end of the music video had the 988 number, although back then I think it was the 1-800 number. And then I continued to be writing poetry that became lyrics. I think the next one that I did was after the death by Naomi Judd. Naomi Judd, the country music icon, she and her daughter Winona were going to be inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame that Sunday. And on Saturday, Naomi shot herself.
I remember that.
And I wrote a poem lyric about that called Lift You Up. And it starts off like you can never tell who's suffering, the most kind and loving face, they hide their secret pain. And the whole song is about, like, please open up so we can lift you up. And it's okay to lay down the burden, but don't give up your life. And that again became a song and a music video. And then in December 2022, I read in the New York Times of the death of Stephen Boss, aka Twitch. Now, I didn't know of him, but I read of him and learned that he was a creative, extremely creative man. He worked with Ellen DeGeneres. He was a dancer. He and his wife, Allison Holker, were on Dancing with the Stars, and they were social media celebrities. And the obituary described him as such a charismatic, loving, high-spirited man, and that it was a shock to very many people, at least from the outside looking in, that he died that way. And I ended up writing a poem that became a song. It was called Heartbreak Times Infinity. And it starts off with like layers of heartbreak. And the first heartbreak that I wrote of was that your very own mind is trying to kill you by what it's telling you. And then the next is you act on it. Now you're dead. Your loved ones are left behind. And then they're at increased risk for suicide. And it's like begging the person to get help. And then also in the poem, but it ended up not to be in the song, but in the poem it says something like, and did this ever occur to you? If you kill yourself, you're killing a part of us too, right? And please get help. So I reached out again on Upwork and I found a singer-songwriter named Shan Carvalho. Now, in the poem lyric, there was a repeated stanza that I had written that goes, but hold on, your thoughts are all mixed up. And then it goes something like, feelings come and go, the pain isn't going to last, right? And that became the Hold On song. So these songs started winning international awards for Best Original Song, Best Lyric. And the Hold On song had also won. It wasn't a best of, but it was what was called a Gold Award. It won a Gold Award at, I think it was the Paris Film Festival. So there I am feeling like totally exhilarated that the song and the video won this award. And in a good way, but also like a little ego way, a little too much ego, right? But at the very same time, so almost imagine it like a split screen, I was feeling terrible because the purpose of the song was for it to be used for a healing purpose for the music video to be shared on mental health websites. And the purpose of the song was not to win an award. And I was having trouble sharing the music video and having people listen to the song. So at the same point of it being, applauded in Paris, here I am, and I can't get the person next to me to listen to the song, right? So I went to bed just feeling bad.
Yeah.
But maybe I had a magic dream. And when I woke up in the morning, I thought, I'm starting the Hold On campaign for suicide prevention, right? So that's how that came about. So what the Hold On campaign does, first, it has all these beautiful and meaningful songs. There's also post-vention songs. There's one called My Crying Song for You. I wrote that lyric after reading posts in a Facebook group for suicide loss survivors. There's one called For You, My Lovely. It's about wondering where the loved one has gone, after they die, and especially dedicated to suicide loss survivors. I do presentations on expressive arts and suicide prevention. Even before I became involved with lyric writing, number of years ago, it could be like maybe 15 years ago or so, I had attended an arts and healing workshop in New York City. I was living there then. And I ended up writing a story, which is called Bird That Wants to Fly. And it's about a depressed, traumatized bird who's walking by the winter carnival. And it's about to walk into a puddle because it can't change direction. And it looks in the water and it sees the words, literally, the words are written in the water, beautiful animal that I am. And it looks up and sees a magical horse. And the horse ends up saying, little bird, why are you walking, not flying? Doesn't it take longer that way? And then it ends up that the horse asks, what's your story? And the bird says, I'll tell it to you in one sentence. Otherwise, I'll get confused. And it's bad weather, rainstorms, snowstorms, blizzards, children with rocks, men with shotguns, birds crashing into each other. So it decides to walk. And then the horse encourages it to spread its wings, to go onto the roller coaster because the horse knows the owner. And at the end, the bird has spread its wings. Well, amazingly, I ended up finding an illustrator. That's a story in itself about how I found the illustrator, but the story inspired an opera.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, by Trilogy, an opera company in Newark, New Jersey. And a friend of the opera company is Danny Glover, the actor, and he narrated the story. So even before I became involved more so with suicide prevention, there was that wanting to heal that hurt, right?
Yeah.
And art can be either experiencing art, music, poetry, an opera, song, or creating the art yourself can be so healing and also educative, right? Because the story is of the hurt and the pain, but the story also is about the connection and the healing. Right?
Yeah.
And the Hold On campaign, again, can include expressive arts and suicide prevention or straight mental health education presentations that I've done. I've done about 3 on the Mental Health Academy platform, one for the Telehealth Certification Institute, grand rounds at medical schools, doing some things with NAMI as well. There's the artwork, the Creative Lifelines series of posters. I have suicide prevention bracelets, pins, stickers, posters, and most recently, we have funding from the Oregon Council of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry for the Create Resilience Youth Art Contest for suicide prevention. So that's open to Oregon youth, 13 to 21, free to enter, on the theme of improving youth mental health. So it could be an essay, but it could also be something like a song or a poem or artwork, as long as it talks about improving youth mental health. And there are cash awards starting with $350.
Oh, wow.
So the entries are accepted May 1st through August the 1st, and we'll be announcing the winners. And of course, all who contribute are, quote, winners, right, in sharing their story. They'll be announced on September 10th, which is World Suicide Prevention Day. And I'm planning on this being an annual event.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. I love all the work you're doing. It's I love it when people's passions and experiences combine and they use that to, pay it forward and help others. And yeah. And I also feel like, there's just not enough art and creativity in the world these days. So using it for a purpose is just that much more, I don't know, just wonderful.
And it
Uh,
really is it's a way to connect people through the art too.
mhm.
So the theme is serious but also uplifting and
Yes.
to inspire hope. But the art is beautiful.
Hmm.
The words are even in describing. I'm thinking of in the Don't Give Up video. The video animator and media design artist is Lucia Martinez Rojas, who's from Colombia, South America. And she and I have worked on many projects together. And Lucia, and it's okay with her for me to share this, she has her own mental health history and suicidality. And there's one part of the video, well, a lot of the video, it has her own, literally, it has her hands in it, that her
Mm,
hands are in the video, and her hands are having a conversation with each other. So you see one hand trying to like interact with the other, and the hand is kind of pulling away. And
yeah.
then there's hands like this, or in a square shape. And then there's another part where I think she's doing like a butterfly shape with her hands, right? Talking about like it's that the light comes from the darkness,
Hmm.
right? And then the
Mm,
animation is so beautiful that you can be expressing something painful and something so authentic, but it's eye catching. And I
yeah.
think it enables people also, and maybe enables and encourages, empowers people to share their own story, right?
Hmm.
Or to start a
Yeah.
conversation about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes the words are insufficient,
Exactly.
that dark, that because part of it is that I think the background is kind of dark, and then you see like a streak of color going across, and then you see her hands become the butterfly, and that
Hmm.
whole imagery I think can resonate with us much more than I'm having a bad day and
Yeah.
want to end my life, which is important to say, but the imagery also is evocative and can reach
Hmm.
us in a different and deeper place.
Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to start that conversation
Yes,
other than just blurting
exactly.
out, like, I feel terrible and I need some help. You draw a picture or write a song or do anything creative as a sort of an introduction to the conversation. And you can start talking about that thing and then lead it into, more personal aspects
You,
of what's
you
going
know,
on and why you
what
did
you
that.
said is so true. And in what I shared with you about Bird That Wants to Fly, when I went to that workshop, nowhere in my mind was this story. I had no idea I was going to write a story, none of that. I was just going to
Hmm.
the workshop. And what they had us do, there was this was the Therapeutic Arts Alliance of Manhattan had sponsored it. There was some warm up exercises. I think we were in two rows and we were mirroring each other and throwing like, I don't know, a ball back and forth. And we did some other exercises. And then what they had us do was three pieces of paper representing three parts of yourself. use your non-dominant hand and scribble on the page without any intention to draw something. Then
Okay.
you looked at the scribble and to see if you saw something in there that could be a picture of something. And I thought I saw a bird. I thought I saw a horse. And I also thought I saw what could be a roller coaster. So then you had to draw out the image by adding to it. Then you titled it. And I titled the first one, Bird That Wants to Fly, which of course was me. The next one was Beautiful Animal That You Are, which I changed to Beautiful Animal That I Am. And then the last I titled Roller Coasting is Fun, True, False, or Both. And then we were asked to stand in the center of a circle with all the other group members around us. And we were to embody and become the image and speak for it.
Oh,
And
wow.
then we were asked to write. So it's right. So just really amazing because that story that I wrote through the symbolism was my story. Okay. And if it were not for that art, it never would have been born. It never would have emerged. All that art prompted it.
Yeah.
If
Art
someone
is
said,
amazing.
okay, everybody, here's a piece of paper. We have 20 minutes to write, that I would not have been writing that story.
Right. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing about all of the wonderful things that you're doing in the world and for sharing your story with us here today. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you for listening. Remember that you are loved, you are worthy, you are valuable, you are meant for more, and that it really does get better. If you are in crisis, there are numbers that you can call or text to get the help that you need. That information for Canada and the US is in the description below each episode. If you are in immediate crisis, please call 911. We love you, and I hope you'll listen again.